Hey guys, hope everyone is doing well. Let me just check on the audio really quick. Cool. Thanks for joining us tonight. And it's going to be a little bit of a Q&A, brief Q&A session. But one of the things we wanted to start it off with is really just talking about beliefs. And the idea is that you trade your beliefs, not the market. And I'm curious for those of you that are watching and listening right now, I'd be curious to see in the comments, what are some of your beliefs in terms of trading? Whether that's beliefs about trading, beliefs about price action. What are those beliefs that you have? And I want to give everyone a second just to really think about it. And then beliefs can be really anything. Beliefs can be that price action works or that the market moves based on price action. Some beliefs that people have is that the news is there always has to be a news event in terms of something happening, such as the sell-off that happened in the Globex market recently. Someone would say that my belief is that a news event had to cause that or else this wouldn't happen. Others would argue that, and people like Al would say that that belief was technical. And so, and James, thanks for joining us. And we've also got Faisal. We'll bring him on in just a second, just to kind of chat with you guys and share some thoughts. But overall, I'm really curious, what are some of those beliefs that some of you have in terms of trading? James, what do you think about beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are fundamental. So, we were talking before we came on, and then I ran into some sticky login situations. So, sorry for being late. When you start, and actually, I think for most of the iterations of PTM, Ali has at least talked about beliefs. This time, he had everyone start this session or this reset of PTM by writing out all of their beliefs, which is a lengthy exercise that takes weeks, because it's really a process of discovery. You don't really understand what beliefs you're operating on for quite a while until you write them down, and like all things, they become much clearer when you write them down. Yeah, I'm not gonna dox your name, Trader Chick, but I appreciate that you wrote 18 pages of beliefs.
That's important, though.
It is.
Yeah,
it's a really fantastic exercise too. Maybe you could just comment on what that did for your process, both in and outside the markets. Because one of the interesting things, at least for me, and leave you to add some comments, but is that it also informs the way that you think about yourself and the things that you do, the assumptions you operate on, when you're not sitting in front of the charts.
Absolutely. Beliefs, they're super, super important. And, one of the things someone asked this question, I saw it today, and I don't remember exactly what the question was, but, it was about a 3-bar micro channel, and they said that they've studied Ali. They did the whole 3-bar micro channel. They can make it work, but for some reason, they can trade the 3-bar micro channel for a few hours in the day, but by the time the day ends, it's a train wreck, they said, and they totally just wipe out everything. And, they're basically, what they were saying is, why does that happen to me? And one of the things that made me think about is, what is their belief? And, do they believe that they're capable of doing it? Number one. Do they also believe, the one that we talk a lot about in Systems Academy, do they believe that they can actually meet their financial goal? In other words, like, one of the reasons why we often take a lot of trades and make a lot of bad decisions is we feel that every trade we miss, we have a belief that every trade that we miss is going to lead to not being able to make it or not figuring it out. When reality is, if you actually really looked into it, you could figure out what your financial goal is and work your way backwards. And beliefs, what's interesting is, to Trader Chick's point, you can have a lot of beliefs, 18 pages of beliefs. Beliefs are not just one or two things. They can be many, many things, and you really have to think about them and really dig them up.
Yeah, and actually, it's an interesting one. the effect of losses. And one of the beliefs that I realize, and one of the reasons why I'm quite comfortable taking losses, is writing out my beliefs. One of the ones I ended up writing down after a while was that I am much more confident in the my read of market context and price structures after taking a loss, because it has confirmed what the probability distribution is for the immediate price action, which I had been operating on. When I took a position, a loss tells me that my calibrated expectations were not correct, and that there is actually this other thing that I should be operating under the assumption about, and now I have a much better sense of what the opportunity really is.
Absolutely. Faisal, what's going on? Many of you know Faisal from his own YouTube channel, and he could be arguably credited for PTM starting in the first place.
He could definitely be credited with that.
So if there was no Faisal, there'd be no PTM. But yeah, I mean, there's taking losses. That's a really, really interesting one when it comes to beliefs. One of my favorite things Ali talked about is he mentioned how he asked Al, Ali calls them shark bites, where he'll take a trade and you'll scale in and you'll take this big loss. And he asked Al many, many years ago, he said, Al, how are you okay with taking those losses? Even though, you're going to be fine, but how do you deal with it? And Al said there's speed bumps. And, most of the time you'll get a loss. It'll be a speed bump and you go over it and you go forward. But occasionally you have a shark bite and, you dust off your arm and you move forward. And one of the things about Ali, when you think about beliefs, is he always says, I'm gonna butcher the quote, but I know James, Faisal, you know it. He talks about how a trade, you're either gonna make money now or make money later. And so if you take a trade and it loses, you can get out of the trade, and it's gonna set up a different trade later that can compensate for that loss. And that's Ali's belief. And his belief is it's either now or later. And so a loss is really just a speed bump or a delay in the end goal.
Yeah,
and it's a really important belief to have. Faisal, what were you going to say?
Yeah, and the loss actually for him, from his belief perspective, is that the loss actually creates a higher probability trade, because there are traders who are trapped. So like he actually feels excited about the fact that there's been a failed high probability trade, because now there's an even higher probability trade. And I think one of the big beliefs for me, and I think some people will be able to relate to this, is that when I was out posting my trades on my channel, I started off trading SPY, and I was risking like $1 per trade or like $2 per trade. And if I had a bad day, I would lose like $3, but I would be devastated. And I would feel like I would reflect on it and wonder why I feel so bad only losing $3. And it's exactly what you said, Brad. It's like, it's symbolic of the fact that I'm not there yet. It's symbolic of the fact that like I haven't figured this out. And so those beliefs about what it means to lose were definitely weighing on me, because every loss meant that, man, there's still 6 months left. There's still a year left. And I had to change those beliefs about what it meant to lose as, okay, there's something in here that's making me lose. So this loss is a sign that there's something that I'm approaching this in the wrong way. And so instead of making the loss mean, okay, that's 6 more months, for me, it started to mean, okay, you're asking the wrong questions. You're studying the wrong way. Like there's something fundamental about the way I was doing it that needed to change, instead of just, I need more time. And that was another belief of mine, is that, I need 3 more months. I need 6 more months. Instead of, I need to ask better questions. I need to approach this a different way. So yeah, those beliefs, they're hidden and you have to dig really deep, but they can definitely govern the way that you approach trading, the way you approach losses, and the way you approach your entire journey as a whole.
This is fascinating, because the impact of our lives outside of markets, and the impact and the way that affects our behavior in markets. I mean, how we're conditioned to respond. I come from music and literature background, and mistakes there are common, and they're very low stakes. Trader Chick says the miscalculations as a nurse are literally life and death, and I can imagine that changing that mindset into thinking in probabilities is very difficult. It was actually funny. My son had his tonsils out a few months ago, and when I was sitting down with the ENT who was doing the surgery, she said, there's like about 5% of people have some bleeding afterwards, and maybe 1% of them actually need to end up going to the ER for it. I was like, you're telling me that that's the probability my son will have like some complications? I was like, we'll do this all day long.
Yeah, this is great.
And she's like, wow, that was not the reaction I get most of the time. It's like this,
But it's a really, Trader Chick has a really interesting kind of viewpoint, because those beliefs, while in her reality, are very real, and those kind of mistakes can be devastating and have permanent consequences. And what's interesting is I had a student last year who was actually he was a state trooper up in the New York area, and he kind of shared similar stories. Like, that was a hard shift a little bit for him. Was more or less, he's been a cop for 15, 20 years, something like that, or a state trooper, and just that same mentality of basically knowing that the decisions you make can be detrimental, and it's not so simple as messing up a trade or messing up a musical instrument. Like, there's real consequences, and that's a hard thing to believe and understand. One thing that we've seen from several people, especially in Systems Academy, they understand, they make a system, they realize the system is 68%, 70%, maybe better. And what's so interesting about it is they logically know that 7 times out of 10 they'll win, 3 times out of 10 they're going to lose. However, the one time they lose, they get so frustrated and angry, and they just can't stand the loss. And he's in one individual who he told us how it took him literally thinking about a casino and thinking about like roulette, and basically looking up all the statistics and game theories of just how a casino operates, and how thinking about how a casino places, one in Vegas places, I don't know how many trades, or bets, but like 200,000 bets in a given like 24-hour period, and their edge is like 2 or 3%. And so they know they're going to lose that, however many times in a day, but they know if they just keep playing the wheel, if they keep spinning the wheel, they're always going to come out on top. And he said that viewpoint was a huge change in his belief. His belief that a trade is really just you can't control the distribution of the probabilities. You can control the probability to a degree, but you can't control the distribution as to how it happens.
Yeah, it's interesting because my brother-in-law is a heart surgeon, and we were talking when we were visiting them, and he said that everything he does is process. It's all process oriented, and obviously the outcomes are the probability distribution of beneficial outcomes are significantly different than in trading. But the point is that it's a process, and like he knows that as long as he follows the process, everything is going to be fine. There's going to be things that are outside of his control. Someone doesn't do the things they're supposed to do during their recovery. There's all the things that you can't control, but all the things that he can control, right? It's that process, that very consistent, repeatable process, which is one of the things that, I think Ali articulates so clearly.
Samir, your point about revenge trading, for me, this is my perspective of like how I've gone through this. I think there's one school of thought that when you feel like you're revenge trading, there's an approach of like understanding the emotions behind the revenge trading and trying to calm yourself down and trying to either do breathing exercises or trying to distract yourself. And I think what I learned, especially from Ali talking about beliefs, is that there's probably a core belief that came before that made you feel like revenge was necessary. And that's what I felt for myself as well. It comes from a place of, to James's point, not knowing the probabilities. I think when it comes to known probabilities, when you lose and like Ali always says this, that there's a failure rate for every trade. And if you know the failure rate, so if you take a trade and there's a 30% chance I'm going to lose this trade and a 70% chance I'm going to make profit on this. When you lose and you're so confident that it was one of the 30%, then you don't have an emotional attachment to the loss. And think about like flipping a coin. Like if you're flipping a coin and you're making $2 every time it's heads and losing $1 every time it's tails, it's a profitable system. Most people would not feel upset that it landed tails. They would know that the coin is a known probability. Whereas with trading, the reason that like I feel revenge trading sometimes, and I felt it a lot more before, is that I didn't know the probability. So when I lost a trade, I thought my initial instinct was, I really suck at this. And it wasn't that, oh, this was a 40% probability event or a 30% probability event. It was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then my emotions would take over and try to prove myself wrong, that no, I do know what I'm doing. Let me force this trade here. So, and Al and Ali will both talk about that it's in the numbers that you find peace. It's in the numbers that you find direction. And when you know the probabilities over hundreds or thousands of trades, that you press the button and there's a 30% chance you're going to lose. When you lose that trade, when you have the experience of winning 7 out of 10 of them, it doesn't feel as hard to let the next one go or let the bad trade go, because you don't have an emotional attachment to that loss. You just know it's a number.
You know, one of my favorite things, Faisal, to that kind of point about probabilities, I think so interesting, is one of the things Ali talks a lot about is how when you think about trading, you know, the work is 95% of the trading work is outside of the trading hours. And that 5% of the work is actually just clicking the mouse. And I remember Ali would tell us all the time, you know, to him, trading is relaxing. It's like it's his peaceful time. It's his Zen time to just kind of be relaxed and enjoy it. And, you know, the reason for that is because he can rely on all of the hours he spent outside of this, basically the market, preparing for the market. And, you know, really to your point, you know, one of the things that is really common people do is they think to themselves, I have to work harder to get there. And and they misplace it. You do have to work harder to get there, but the hard work is really in the 95% of the time outside the market to be prepared for trading when it happens. When you're actually trading, the real work is often waiting and sitting there. You know, it's not taking a lot of trades, and it's really, you know, I think that, and we're all big believers of systems here, but really understanding, you know, do you actually know what your process is? One of my favorite, I learned this last year from actually someone in my systems academy, and I really thought it was pretty cool. It's something called the OODA loop, and it's, I believe, observe, orient, decide, and act. So OODA. And the Air Force made that you can look it up, but basically, I believe the U.S. Air Force made it. I don't know how long ago, but there was I think it was like a Chinese fighter plane, or there's some sort of fighter plane outside of the U.S. that was much more it had much more air superiority than the U.S. And one of the ways that the U.S. figured out how to better combat them is to have a much better process. In other words, they would train themselves to think a certain way over and over and over. And because of that, through that training over and over and over, they were allowed to basically become a little bit, every turn that they would make in the skies would improve what they were doing just slightly. And even though they had less superior equipment, they were able to outperform the enemy. And it's actually a pretty cool story, and it's very relatable to trading. You know, you think about your trading process. You can think about it as a flow chart. So think back to your very last trade. If you're, you know, think about whatever your last trade was and ask yourself, what was my mental decision tree of that trade? Do I actually have one? You know, can I sit there and write down that decision tree? Okay, this was the signal generator. This was what I thought, you know, and then if this, do that. Many of you have seen some of Ali's flow charts that he's either released, or some of you that have been in PTM or Systems Academy, and they're very detailed. And so one of the things to always even think about with your beliefs is, do you actually have a mental system to actually start your trading day and then for each trade that you take? Because if you don't, that might reflect a belief that you have about yourself. You know, and that can even be as simple as, for some people, you know, trading everyone knows trading's a business, but do you actually believe that? You know, you just trade, like, we know trading's a business, but do you have standard operating procedures for your trading? You know, I thought it was really cool one time talking with Ali. I think he showed James and I, he had this like mental standard operating procedure for buying any equipment in his trading room, in his office. and it, it had to be this caliber and this type of machine, and everything had to be in this order. And he had a checklist for it, and he had a backup of a backup and all these things. And that's just his belief that he has is, if you prepare for everything, prepare for what you can, and in real time, it's easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason why he advises studying at least 1,000 charts, and so that you internalize basically the outcome, the four different. We've talked about this before, but all of the different potential outcomes for the signal that you want to trade. This extends though to every signal, right? So it's 1,000 charts per signal. It's also 1,000 charts if you want to study a context phenomenon, right? It's 1,000 charts. So each of them requires that much because of the variability. And this is exactly what he talked with you, Faisal, about in the that epic interview that you all did, where he just goes through what it really means to do that kind of deep work, and the shallow, not deep. And so when you have something that's shallow but very, very broad, it's the relationships between things that make it complicated, not the depth of the principle. And so the understanding, like just the absolute variability of how a trade can fail is overwhelming. And so one of the reasons like why someone who trades a 3-bar microchannel might be able to do it early, or or not, might be better at trading it earlier in the day and not later in the day. It just they haven't studied, or maybe they fatigue. I mean, fatigue is very real, but it could be that just not understanding the probability distributions of the way failures occur in the later session. Like that's just another thing that needs to be studied, as like a subcategory of a signal. Time of day has a significant impact on the way trades succeed and fail. And one of the things I didn't realize until until I put together all of the CAD program was the rate of creating new highs of day and new lows of day in the mid session. It's like no matter what other filters you apply to your study, it's like between 15 and 20%. 20% at the highs. It's usually between like 10 and 15%. Which reflects what we all know is usually the market's in a trading range in the middle of the day. But if you're looking at the way trades fail, and if you're getting out of trades early, or trying to cut losses in the mid session, and you're expecting these big moves, most of the time that's just not going to happen. And it's something that takes a lot of visual reinforcement to actually learn and internalize. But it is a fundamental principle. But then understanding also what it looks like when those things fail, and you do get new highs and new lows in the mid session. So
absolutely, and it's one of the things James, I always think about you when I think about a Z-score, like a bar with a high standard deviation. I always think about you because you always talk so much about Z-scores and just standard deviations of bars. And the higher the standard deviation, the more the bar is going to pull back before it gets a second leg. And once you really think about, once you do anything, once you really understand a probability of something and you truly know it and you truly believe in the probability, it's a lot easier to follow what that probability is. Everyone hears Ali, he always jokes, and I do laugh about it. He always says that the stop order trader is second place. The first place trader is the limit order trader, because most bars are not by the closed bars, they're by the pullback bars. And therefore, because most bars pull back, whatever percentage. And that's all from taking the time to really learn that and really understand it. And that's one of the reasons for Ali creating PTM and Ali creating Trade With Me. As many of you know what Trade With Me is at this point. Our goal with Trade With Me is for traders to get to see the execution behind the trades, but also get to see the concepts that we're talking about and see Ali actually execute them real time. And so it's going to be price action concepts. It's very similar to stuff you're learning in PTM. The main difference is going to be it's going to be more information per month, and it's going to be much more packed. But the reality is the big thing is going to be the execution. And our real hope with Trade With Me to get traders, for one, there's two hopes. If I could kind of think about what would I want someone to get out of the program. Obviously I want someone to get knowledge out of the program. There's Ali. We were talking with Ali the other day about the October modules, the slides, and it's less than 300, but it's more than 280. And so it's going to be a long one.
Well, I think it's
going in October.
I think it's important to note though that there is, and this is we'll bring up the question from Trader Chick in just a moment, but it is important to note one of the big differences between the educational material in PTM and Trade With Me is PTM is loosely structured over a long period of time. It allows for a lot of feedback, a lot of direction, like today. Ali added, a new agenda item, for this weekend because someone was asking questions about something. So while it does have a loose structure, there's like large topics that he'll cover and that he'll spend time on, and in this particular run that he'll dedicate more time to. Trade With Me is a very structured program with the goal of covering all of the material that Ali believes, and obviously Brad and I will be doing the videos for, that he believes every trader needs to know in order to, and actually you don't even need to know all of it, verbatim or memorize all of it, but it is the complete foundation for being a successful trader, right? There's nothing that you would need that is outside of this. There's always things that you can add. There's nuances, and obviously there's always studies that you can continue to do. I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I think Brad and I were on a call with him, and extemporaneously he said, "Oh, I have this new indicator that I was, this new study I was doing. Look at this trade I took based on this new thing that I'm looking at." It's like, wow, didn't see that coming. Like, there's just new ideas. Like, there's always going to be new ideas. There's always going to be a reason to continue looking more deeply at something that you find interesting, which is one of the really great values that being fascinated by markets gives us. It's like there's never something, sitting down to watch TV, sitting down to play video games, like, why? Like, there's just so much, so many things that are more interesting, but I think sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, James.
So I was just going to say that, the difference for those who are wondering really about the difference between PTM and TWM is that TWM is very specifically structured. It covers a lot more material than PTM does. The difference is that PTM allows for that conversation. And so TWM will cover more material than PTM. And it will, and then obviously the big difference is that not only will it cover more material, you'll see that material executed in live markets, where PTM is obviously historical. It happens on the weekend, so there's no live markets to be had, except for Bitcoin. But we don't look at Bitcoin. So those are the big differences, and it's important to remember that your TWM is a very pedagogically structured program, and the way that Ali's compiling the material is very intentional. I mean, that's the reason why we ended up with almost 300 slides in the second event. Is because we did not want to overload students in the first event with 300 slides. I mean, we could have front loaded all of those into the first event, but that would have been overwhelming and counterproductive for people who want to go through 10 months of this. So the first event is
on the second month, not the first one.
Yes, yeah. We'll just surprise everyone with a phenomenal amount of material for the second one, but then the rest of them will be more manageable, much more like the first. But with the second, and the understanding being that there's a lot of foundational principles that we need to be able to talk about freely, without saying, oh, well, we can't really talk about this yet because we haven't covered it. So, Ali's going to be doing these things, but we have to talk about it in a different way because it's not something that we've covered. And in this way, we'll cover all of those really foundational concepts that will allow us to be both specific and practical, right? Not have to talk around things. So
absolutely,
it's important to remember.
And that's one of the things like that James really hinted on that's really, really great to understand is price action, it's still the same concepts. But the difference is with Trade With Me, because it's much more there, it's a recording, and therefore there's much focus on, okay, this month's this month is that, and it's much more, there's no derailing of the course, and therefore we can better guide the student into whoever's participating into exactly what we want them to learn at that given moment. Whereas PTM is much more, as James said, that Saturday class, you're all in the classroom gathered together, and it's, hey, teacher, I have a question. Can we talk about this for a second? And that can derail the entire conversation and lead it even down a different path. And so you're going to learn the same things. It's just much more focused. But one of the things I really want to talk about for a second is, I thought this was really cool. It was in 2022, so the first Orlando event. And for those of you that have signed up for Trade With Me, that have already signed up, this is actually part of that bonus material. So if you go to the breakout section, I think there's 4 or 5 videos over breakouts. And in one of those videos, I believe Ali has 10 different, basically, system ideas. And I remember I was sitting down with Ali sometime during the event, and we were just chatting for a minute. And he said, what's funny? We were talking about his presentation he just gave. And he said, what's funny? Someone could actually take that presentation and just take one of those concepts, the attack formation. That's James, you know what I'm talking about. There's a couple others that I'm blanking on right now. But he said you could take one of those concepts from this slide, the 10+2, many of you have seen that, and build an entire system out of it. And now he said what's funny is he's giving everyone basically the playbook to build it. It's just a question of, will they actually go out and do it? And that's kind of the goal of Trade With Me. James said you don't have to learn every concept in Trade With Me to make it work. You need to learn, there's foundational pieces that you have to understand. But there's going to be all sorts of concepts in there that if you really take the time to go deep with it, you can do a lot with it.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to cover market structure, breakouts, reversals. There's Brad. I don't know if you have the agenda handy or the syllabus handy. Yeah, I can bring it up. But
we got it right here.
While you're bringing that up, I want to answer Trader Chick's question here. She asked if the day structure doesn't provide exactly what we were discussing or something close to what we were discussing in that event's educational material, would we reschedule? We've talked about this. There is obviously, of like an outside chance that he would do that, but it is not like if something happens and the day is not doing what we want, like, if we're talking about I1Rs.
If the day is in a 1-point range for 81 bars, we'll probably reschedule.
Yeah, but like if it's the event that we're dealing with I1Rs and we haven't had any by bar 40, we're not going to reschedule. We're going to let the day go because there's a lot of educational material that we can derive from that. My thought initially is the absence of the material tells you a lot about what to do with the day as well. So like, when there aren't I1Rs, what does that tell you? When there aren't, big breakout and follow throughs, when you don't have, there's always reversals, but if you don't have strong reversal and follow throughs, there's, or if all of your reversal and follow throughs fail, if you're in a small pullback trend, right? There's lots of things that you can still do with the absence of the thing that you're trying to discuss. And so you can teach it, by inverse, or so this is a long way of saying I don't think that we will be canceling or rescheduling, and I hope that we won't, because I think that it's mainly the reason that you've identified, that people are going to plan their work around this, because it is going to be a full day event.
And there's also a follow-up day, but the big thing, and I want to talk about this. This is actually a really good question, but part of it is we want people to really try their best. Like, obviously we're going to record it, so there's going to be people that sign up that cannot make it to every session. We're going to record it so they have the ability to go afterwards. And those, the hope is that most people can watch it live, but the expectation is that the people go back on the recording and study it. And so someone asked about, Trade With Me versus the Brooks Trading course. Most of the people I'm talking to here have already watched the Brooks Trading course. And that's a little bit of my expectation, is most of you here, you've seen the Brooks Trading course, and Ali's much more about the system component. and Al is very discretionary. But here's the thing I would invite you to think about. What's different between them? Price action is still price action concepts. And there's obvious differences. The Brooks Trading, they're two different courses. They still have price action components. One is live trading. Trade with me is live trading. But they're still similar concepts. A breakout is still going to be a breakout. And first principles, volatility expansion, volatility contraction, those are still fundamental things about the market you can't change. But one of the things I would invite, if you haven't really looked much into Ali, there's a lot of good resources on this channel. But one of the things I'd invite you to really think about is thinking about the difference in terms of systematic. There's always a middle ground. Everyone thinks of Al. It's always kind of funny to me. Everyone thinks of Al as a purely discretionary trader. And because he always says, I can look at a bar, and on any bar, I can basically take a trade. But the reality is he doesn't do that. If you really listen closely to what Al says, there's only so many types of trades he takes. So he is a rule-based systematic trader. He has a lot of flexibility on things. Like you heard it, like I remember all the time, he talked about how you get a rally, a pullback to a major trend reversal, to a lower high major trend reversal. And you'd always say, oh, this lower high, it needs a double top. And so it'd go down, and then it would start to retest the double top, lower high major trend reversal. And he would always say, what's interesting is you could sell at the market right here and risk 4 ticks and make 10 points, but the probability is 20%. He knows that he could structure a trade right there and do that, but he's never going to take that trade because he wants to win majority of the time. And for those of you in Orlando, you heard Al talk about how when you're in a bull trend, if price breaks strongly below the moving average, or if you get 2 strong closes below the moving average, he will never stay long. So there's a lot of mental systems that Al actually has in trading. The interesting thing about the Brooks Trading course is it's actually a giant flow chart. If you really think about it, if you think about his market cycle videos, trend trading range, and then he starts talking about breakouts and reversals and how a trend is either a breakout or a channel. Everything flows into a binary decision tree. And so I think the real benefit is understanding both really, really well. Understand the systems component of Ali. The biggest thing I want people to understand is Al is an encyclopedia. It's 30 years of information. But there's fundamentals you have to understand. But the starting point, understand breakouts, understand a 3-bar micro channel, start small. One of my favorite, there was a podcast. This is actually before, I think it's when Al wrote his book. And it was like in 2009. There was this podcast. Someone had Al on a podcast, and it sounds terrible because like it was really, really old and there wasn't any video. But he talked about the chart. And he said all he does all day long is he waits for a failed breakout. He waits for a second entry buy. So he waits for the market to break above yesterday's high or low, and he looks for a second entry. And then he takes it for a 4-point swing. All he did the whole day. And now he's graduated more towards, obviously, he does a lot of stuff now. And so most traders start with some sort of system, and they slowly become more comfortable with what they do what they're doing, and they increase. The big difference is, go ahead, James.
I think that if you've ever gone to learn the same thing from different people, so like, for example, I don't know if it was here or in SA2 or in PTM. In one of these fora, at one point, I mentioned that I had studied jazz guitar with 4 or 5 different teachers at different points, and then I studied improvisation with a trumpet player, and that was the most I ever learned. I'm not suggesting that Ali is the trumpet player in this analogy, but that he is going to have a different way of teaching. And that's really the most important thing, is that he is teaching the same first principles. And so like if we boil everything down to the first principles of market behavior and price action, those are all the same. But it's a matter of how you, okay, Mo, good looking out. So that's really the difference, is the method of teaching the same material. And for me, some in that case, it wasn't until I was working with a trumpet player that I really heard phrasing. I had played saxophone before, but I had never, like, listening to guitar players, you don't hear a lot of phrasing because they're not forced to take breaths. But when you listen to a lot of trumpet players, when you listen to a lot of people who play, woodwinds or brass, they obviously have to breathe. And so there's just natural phrasing that occurs where, string instruments can be a bit busier. And so I started to hear phrasing differently. And then I started to hear other things differently. And it was just because the person who was teaching me was teaching the same material, just from a different perspective. And underlying principles were obviously all the same. And so some people learn perfectly from Al, right? There's nothing else they need. But for others, who have different dispositions, they have different ways of learning. I mean, one of the other things that you do when you write out your beliefs is one of the most beneficial places to start is really defining how you learn. And just understanding first how you learn it. This is actually in Ali's article, Becoming a Professional Price Action Trader. Just understanding how you learn and understanding how you have to study in order to learn the way that is best for you. And then from there, understanding that Ali is going to teach the material in a very particular way. Like you've seen, the difference between Ali's slides and the slides in the Brooks Trading Course. Brooks Trading Course slides have tons of information on them. So do Ali's slides. Ali's slides are just articulated differently, right? The ideas are just conveyed differently. The modules in his events are just structured differently, and there's no reason not to do both. But the reason to, I think for me, I'll speak from my experience here. With Ali, one of the things that I got, because I spent a lot of time with the Brooks Trading Course, was the being able to discuss that method, right? The systematic process of both the study and the implementation of the study. So not just here are all the things that we know to be true. Okay, but then what do you do with them? And so then it's the process that extends from those observations of the market. And so that's really the biggest difference that I would see. And so then, Brad, I don't know if we want to bring up the syllabus, but that's actually I can bring it up here.
Yeah.
If you want to scroll through it, but sorry, let me hide this. But if you go down to the syllabus, you can see just the way that the material is structured is, you have, as you see, with the Brooks Trading Course, you'll have a main concept, but he articulates all of these principles very, everything is very, well structured, but it's also for the intermediate, beginner, intermediate, and advanced traders. The Brooks Trading Course is not intended for the intermediate and advanced traders. It was not like the books are can be much more for the advanced trader, where the Brooks Trading Course, the video course, is different.
Yeah. And I want to share a few, because I have a couple thoughts with that. One is you have to think about what the trader is trying to accomplish. The Brooks Trading Course is also very much a very large amount of information, and it's very valuable information. But the goals of the traders are different. Al's goal is to give you basically a wide concept of everything he knows about the market from top to bottom. And it's up to the individual to take what they're learning and do something with that. Ali's goal is much more breakouts and second leg focused. He's not talking about, a good example is the books, James. If you go to the books of Al's and you really look at it, there's a lot of little nuances in there about various topics. And some of those things, the trader doesn't actually, a trader may not use, such as, he talks about major trend, all sorts of different things. But the biggest point I want to highlight is the benefit one is going to gain. You're really going to gain most by both. For me, I resonate much more with Al and stop orders. And even with of making charts, I resonate a lot more making charts the way Al does. It makes more sense to me. That doesn't mean I'm not, obviously I'm going to study Ali. And so it's really important to understand what each one is trying to teach. Ali is trying to teach much more of system design. Al is trying to explain much more about his thoughts of the overall market as a whole. Both can be very effective. And that's why I think a strong understanding both is actually a very strong middle ground. And that's not just from my viewpoint, that's from other viewpoints of people I've talked to who have actually spent years studying Al And at this point, you're studying Ali.
Indeed. And this is Trader Shake says it well. Obviously we know that the main goal for Al is teaching, swing trading and, stop entries, where Ali focuses on the probabilities of limit order trading and the trading for scalps.
And I'll just say one thing really quick, just because I want to say it's still in my mind. This slide right here is going to be 300, almost 300 slides. And so if we do some simple math about how long of a video that's going to be, I'm going to guess, James, do you want to take the first guess?
What? Guess what?
How long month 2 is going to be of a video?
I don't want to guess.
Well, it's going to be, it's going to be,
it's going to be a lot.
Going to be double digits in hours.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I want to say is, this thing might sound really interesting. For some of you have the Brooks trading course and you haven't even finished it, or you've watched it once. And, maybe you've had the Brooks trading course for a year and a half and you've done 40% of it. And you're looking at this saying, wow, this sounds really exciting. Well, really sit down and ask yourself, are you willing to study, I'm going to guess 60 hours, or not 60, probably like 80 hours of information over the course of 10 months? Because it sounds great. All of this sounds like a lot of information and it'd be really, really helpful. But for some people, it's always funny to me, someone, you have to take the time to learn it. Same thing with the Brooks trading course, same thing with this, same thing with PTM, anything. You're going to get the most benefit out of it if you really put in the work to study it. And that's a warning for some of you, because again, I know I've talked to Richard. He's told me what he can look online and see the average percentage of people watching the Brooks trading course. We know how many people spend time on Ali's website with watching things. And it's very easy for some people to not finish things. So if you're, it's kind of a belief, if you're going to, it's a great program. Trade with me, there's a lot of information in it, but it's only as good as the individual willing to study the information and learn something. Same thing with Al's books, same thing with the Brooks trading course. It's only as good as the time you're going to spend watching it.
Indeed. Well, we're coming up on an hour now, and I wonder if anyone has any more questions, whether about beliefs, about TWM, about.
And tell you what, let's
markets at all-time highs. There's lots of exciting things happening.
Let's we'll answer one more. Let's answer one more question, and then ask your comments and ask your question in the comments, and we'll take those into consideration for a future video.
For sure. If the ProTrader archive does it include Ali's study? Are you asking specifically about the flashcards here, or about the ProTrader mentoring archive? Because those are different products. The flashcards is like
both
800.
Include second legs, but they're not the same product.
Yes. So like the ProTrader mentoring is going to be Ali, discussing on videos, and walking through, a variety of different expressions of second legs. So, reversal and follow throughs, breakout and follow throughs, micro channels, I1R. Like there's just lots and lots of ways that you can, have a first leg that has a high probability second leg. But then with the flashcards is basically Ali's collection of notes that he used when he was creating himself as a trader, and they are, for me, my favorite resource. I love the flashcards. I would not replace them with anything. They are spectacular. So if you're looking for but again, it depends how you learn, and so that's a really useful thing to think about before you start looking at either. If you're more of a visual learner, or auditory learner, like you want to listen to someone explain something, and then think about it, take notes, listen to someone explain something, PTM is going to be great. But if you are a visual learner and you want to read a bunch of material, then the flashcards are packed with information, and they are spectacular. So it just depends which one you want to, how you would prefer to learn.
So I think it'd be interesting, this is an hour-long conversation. We're going to wrap this one up, but, take what we've said and write out your beliefs. maybe for those of you that watch the next stream, you can share what beliefs you've learned. And we don't want to influence people in their beliefs, because it's very personal. But think through, take the weekend to think through what your beliefs are. And maybe we can discuss some next week. And if you're interested again in Trade With Me, it's tradewithme.live. The link is in the description. Feel free to check it out. And yeah, we'll see you on the next time we do this.
Just Samir, I would respond with so it was asking how you do it. Do it in I like writing, so you can type them. I
have a notebook.
Yeah, I internalize things much more, coherently, and hold on to them much longer if I write it out by hand. So I write out as much as I can by hand.
There's actually data they've proven that actually by writing, you activate certain parts of your brain versus typing, where it actually really brings in the thoughts. Yeah. That's something they've definitely proven. So yeah,
it allows you to think creatively for sure.
Give it a write it out, see what you come up with.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Have a great night.